From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming out on a lovely fall night here in Washington, D.C., and welcome to the Library of Congress. My name is Rob Casper. I'm the head of the Poetry and Literature Center here, and I'm thrilled and delighted to kick off another of our Asian American Literature Today series events, the first event of the fall with this series. I want to thank our presenting partners, the Asian American Literary Review, the Asian American Studies Program at the University of Maryland, and the Smithsonian Asian Pacific Center, as well as poets and writers. And I want to thank Lawrence Min-Davis, who's at the center of all those organizations, for his hard work to keep this series going. Before we begin, let me just ask you to turn off your cell phones and any other electronic devices that you might have that will interfere with the event. I also want to let you know that this event is being recorded for future webcast, and if you choose to participate in the Q&A session, you give us permission for future use of the recording. And also, let me tell you a little bit about the Poetry and Literature Center here at the Library of Congress. We are home to the Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry. Our 21st Poet Laureate is Juan Felipe Herrera, and you can read all about him online. In addition to taking care of our Poet Laureate, we host 30 to 40 public programs like this throughout the year. We have information on the Poetry and Literature Center outside in the foyer on the table. If you want to find out more about programs like this, you can check that out. You can sign up for our RSS feed. You can also go to our website, www.loc.gov/poetry. So you see in the program the order of events. I'm going to introduce the introducer, but before I do that, let me just give a special shout out to Kundiman's new executive director, Reena Banerjee, who's in the very front row. Let's give her a warm welcome. And I'm happy to introduce my dear friend, the Poet and Kundiman Advisory Board co-chair, Jennifer Chang, to get up and tell you a little bit more about tonight's featured readers, as well as moderate the discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. In preparation for today's reading, I asked the poets Amy Nezuka-Motadle and Janine Joseph to tell me about the first time they met each other. Neither could remember a first or second time, and yet both claimed they didn't remember ever not knowing the other. Nezuka-Motadle wrote, "I feel I've known Janine since the formation of Kundiman. Admittedly, my research yielded no empirical evidence. But I think it illustrates how writing friendships and writing communities, the poems, stories, and conversations that animate an arts culture, can be atmospheric, a kind of weather system that crosses boundaries of time and place to share an experience that we feel immediately, perhaps intuitively in our bones, before recognizing it as a fact like temperature. The fact is that Kundiman has cultivated and nurtured a community of Asian American writers since its first retreat in 2004, and it continues to connect Asian American writers across generations and aesthetics through organized readings like this one, publication opportunities, and formal and informal mentoring relationships. You can find out more about the specific accomplishments of our fellows, faculty, and staff at the website www.kundiman.org. Today is all about Amy Nezuka-Motadle, a two-time faculty member of the Treat, and Janine Joseph, a fellow and the winner of the 2014 Kundiman Poetry Prize. If they themselves cannot remember a first meeting, their poems suggest an ongoing conversation that dynamically and persistently challenges our conventional notions of everyday life. In poems of childhood memory, town life, motherhood, and the deceptively ordinary, Nezuka-Motadle uncovers the animal and mythological, shining a light on the strangeness of tilapia, high school, and Ohio. Joseph's personal lyrics are fraught with the political as she rewrites the American dream as complicated by her family's status as undocumented immigrants. Hers is a poetics that attends to the essential fragmentation of any narrative, formerly rigorous yet riddled always with doubt of self and world. These two poets remind us that writing the songs of oneself is neither a solipsistic nor a lonely exercise, and that to sing it all is to reach out to other people, other cultures and histories, and other possibilities of thought and being. Amy Nezhukumatathil is the poetry editor of Orion, America's premier environmental magazine, and the 2016-2017 Grisham Writer in Residence at the University of Mississippi's MFA program in creative writing in Oxford, Mississippi. She is the author of 3 books of poems, Lucky Fish, At the Drive-In Volcano, and Miracle Fruit, all from Tupelo Press, and her book of illustrated nature essays, World of Wonder, is forthcoming from Milkweed Editions. Janine Joseph's first book is Driving Without a License, and it won the 2014 Kundiman Poetry Prize and was published just this spring from Alice James Books. She also writes for opera, and her libretti for the Houston Grand Opera include What Wings They Were, The Case of Emmeline, On This Muddy Water, Voices from the Houston Ship Channel, and For My Mother's Mother. She's an assistant professor of creative writing at Oklahoma State University in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to tonight's poets.
Leaving the nonprofit immigration lawyer's office, 2001. When the car drifted from the Santa Ana winds, I switched off the radio and pointed at the street poles swaying over the two-way stretch like palms. All night, the wind brushed dry the hills with fire, and I kept driving, his hands steady out the window, taking snapshots of the red whipping rings. I power rolled the windows down and let the smoke grass scent seep into the upholstery, circulate coyote and bird song through the air vents. Can you smell the burning mustard plants, the foxtail and foxglove weeds on my skin? I asked, hands open, the wheel orbiting under my palms. Watch when I let go, I demonstrated, knuckles loosening around the leather, the car coasting left with pollen and butterfly debris. We'd be pitched into the brush glare, I warned, if I let go completely. We'd grate the chain link fence and itch the ashen shrubs. I shuddered slow, a tumbleweed storming the undercarriages, storming the road. B said, right. Like you'd let go. Thank you everyone for coming out tonight to see Amy and I read. Amy is one of my literary heroes, so this is a really surreal experience. Thank you to Rob and Anya and Rita and Kundiman and Jen and Lawrence for making this entire reading and this collaboration possible. As Jen mentioned, I'm going to be reading largely from my book, which just came out this past May. And the book follows an immigrant from the Philippines who is living in the U.S. without proper legal documentation. And the book is very much informed by my own experience, having lived undocumented in the U.S. for 15 years. I immigrated with my family when I was 8 years old in 1991 and did not get my green card until my first year of graduate school at NYU. This next poem has so many parts. There's an epigraph which no longer appears in the book. There are parts, there are sections, and then there's language that is lifted from the USCIS's N400 form for naturalization, as well as language that's taken from a number of newspaper articles about undocumented immigrants and documented immigration. It's called Between Joan the Butterfly, and again, I'll begin with the epigraph. And for each section, I'll just pause. He does not know whether he is Joe who dreams he is a butterfly, or a butterfly who dreams he is Joe. Between Joe and the butterfly, there was necessarily a dividing. Just this is what is meant by the transformation of things. Zhuangzi. Between Joe and the butterfly. On my way to America, I am in an airplane, on a boat. When my life is a story, I am a good swimmer, an American dream, a guest worker, freeloader, fence hopper, uninsured brother carried from hospital to hospital, a crushing caseload, a wrenching anecdote, a deserving young people, an anchor. Before anyone finds me, I am Heartwood exposed by lightning, by the young Republicans, by newscasters playing Find the Illegal Immigrant, Find the Unwed Single, the Crier, the spouse battered by a U.S. citizen spouse, Find the Widower, the one you will petition to marry, the headless bodies in the Arizona desert. I hear they raid when you're naked, in bed, packed like a sardine, pillows tucked around you, I hear like dogs, like alien relatives. While you cry and hug, they swarm, they axe your back door. The trunks of trees, they axe the wild terrain, the scrub, the rapid succession of sounds I make when I walk alone and sweaty and hardly myself in the dark where a man migrating, suffering great pain is found hanging from a tree later charred. According to eyewitnesses, I am the same crazy, lost on my way to the dead man's tree, to the hollowed tree of the Virgin, in the valley of the lost ones, in the wilderness, stripped of my underwear for the money stitched into the seams, for a mental status evaluation, a physical examination to include complete disrobing. Worse than genital herpes, the situation with these illegals into the microphone, says the interviewee. I, the undersigned, am not a communist, am not likely to become a public charge. I understand I do not traffic other humans, recruit child soldiers. I do not seek to practice polygamy, engage in espionage, in ordered genocide, in items A through L. I do not have to reimburse the school. I do solemnly swear if I am not who I say I am, I may subject me to permanent exclusion. Landscape with American Dream. Putting down the beats, you got to thinking my life had dead-ended and were serious, and I agreed, but first I need capers and whatever's past the pimentos, I said, and scanned the list. I needed the lemon glaze, the stuff I craved down the ethnic lane, and still I had to sing of how I walked 1,000 hot miles because my mom was Catholic and pressed the white blouse, the blue jumper, and we were good people, and good people lent their good cars to those in more need. It was like the distance from here to the Philippines, I nodded. I map-quested it once. And they, my brothers, were all eyes on their Game Boys, dodging potholes, snake holes, and anthills from St. Francis to who knows where we lived. We walked so much my dad every night needed the stiff backs of our shoes so they wouldn't scallop our heels when we walked lesson after lesson without turning an ankle. What wrecks we were, what expert wrecks burning down those sun-spun streets. Now look how I muscle my stack of avocados and hearts. See how I coast and carve and fault my rootless cart. See how I course my arm to say go and go. Do you wait for me? Do you circle the lot's quiet loop while I lift into a run like a dog dead and slipped from her leash? Do you break? Do you idle? Do you whir your arm from an aisle like a table saw saying, come, come? I've a line to beat and no double coupons, so do you strike up your shoes? Do you barehand your grief and pump it slack, lap after me? Come, bred roadster, come, American galloper, come bark this breath out with me. One final poem. I had a first career when I was 3 years old. I was the face of Kraft cheddar cheese in the Philippines. And this title takes its name from part of the jingle from a Kraft cheddar cheese commercial from 1986. More milk makes it better. In 1986, when I was 3.5 years old, I won an award for sitting cute and biting into a slice of Kraft cheddar cheese. Then how my star blew up. I was on the cover of calendars, in the Sunday section, stomping the runway, turning down small parts in movies. At 7, I promised my mom I would never be chubby again. No way. I swirled a dress in the dressing room and was the daughter my brothers hated. Nothing could stop me, not even America with its rich marshmallow cereals. But the milk, oh God, the grade A vitamin D milk. No one knew what it was doing to me. Little Miss Piggy drinking 8 ounces by the kidney bean pool. All my life it had been coconut juice, mango juice, and water. Little Miss Piggy mending her polka dot suit. It had been goat's milk and goat's milk. Little Miss Piggy clasping her knees to her chest and winning the cannonball contest. I was small, indomitable, and could hide behind the couch with a stein. It was the drink of all the saints. It was worth all my work in the world. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being out here in the middle of the work week. I'm going to play just a little snippet of something for you. So, I'm a child of the 80s, to carry on the 80s theme here, Janine. And there was a drama that was Emmy nominated. High schoolers, when I go around and visit them, they don't believe that this happened or that it was possible. But there was a drama called The Incredible Hulk. And that was full of my childhood crush, Bill Bixby there. So I know most high school, this was not the stereotypical like 80s crush at the time, Michael Jackson, Menudo, Ricky Schroeder, all that stuff. But there was a song, this was the theme song of the show. They played it at the end of every sad episode. So this is The Incredible Hulk I want you to be thinking of, not the Avengers nonsense. This is, oops. Do you guys know this show? Okay. I swear. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I think it's on FX every once in a while. You have to see this. There was no special effects. It was Bill Bixby was the scientist, and then it would be bad editing, and then Lou Ferrigno played the Hulk. So this is called What I Learned from the Incredible Hulk. When it comes to clothes, make an allowance for the unexpected. Be sure the spare in the trunk of your station wagon with wood paneling is not in need of repair. A simple jean jacket says, hey, if you aren't trying to smuggle rare ink and coins through this peaceful little town and kidnap the local orphan, I can be one heck of a mellow kind of guy. But no matter how angry a man gets, I learned that a smile and a soft stroke on his bicep can work wonders. I learned that male chests also have nipples, warm and established, and I learned that green does not always mean envy. It's the meadows full of clover and chicory that the Hulk seeks for rest, a return to normal. And sometimes Sometimes a woman gets to go with him, her tiny hands correcting his crumpled hair, the cuts in his hand. I want you to know that green is the space between water and sun. It's the cover for a quiet man, each of his ribs shuttling drops of liquid light. I moved around a lot when I was little, various places all over kind of rural America. My mother was a psychiatrist, and we always lived in these rural kind of areas that had state hospitals. But I never felt lonesome because my father and my parents were always working, but they always made sure that we knew every constellation in the sky from as long as I can remember. We knew the names of rocks, we knew the names of plants and fruit, so that, you know, even if I didn't make friends right away, at least I could look up and be kind of grounded and stuff. And this is called mosquitoes. When my father wanted to point out galaxies or Andromeda or the Seven Sisters, I would complain of the buzz of mosquitoes and the yawning moon quiet in that slow summer air. All I wanted was to go inside into our cooled house and watch TV or paint my nails. What does a 15-year-old girl know of patience? What did I know of the steady turn of whole moon valleys cresting into focus? Standing there in our driveway with him, I smacked my legs, my arms, and my face while I waited for him to find whatever pinhole of light he wanted me to see. At night, when I'd wash my face, I'd find bursts of blood and dried bodies slapped into my skin. Complain at breakfast how I'd never do this again, Dad. I have more homework now, Dad. I can't go to school with bites all over my face anymore, Dad. And now I hardly ever say no. He has plans. He has plans to go stargazing with his grandsons, and for once, I do not protest. He has plans. I know one day he won't ask me, he won't be there to show me how the rings of Saturn glowing gold jump if you catch it on the right night. I know one day I will look up into the night sky, searching. I know the mosquitoes will still have their way with me, but I know my father one day won't be there to hear me complain. Hang on one second. My father is from South India, and I have not been northern India, up where the Taj Mahal is, and I'm planning a big kind of family trip out there. And kind of to my chagrin, my surprise, there are reviews of basically all the wonders of the world now. Like there's Yelp reviews of these places. I always say like the cesspool of humanity is in the one-star reviews of places. This is, and so I have a little mini series of poems, like one-star reviews of the Great Wall of China. This is one-star reviews of the Taj Mahal. This is all a found poem. All I did was break the lines. Too bad it's man-made. As a standalone attraction, I guess it's passable, but compared to the McDonald's at Celebration Mall, it's just meh. Not for Indians. Very, very tacky. There is no coat room at the South Gate. The garden is basic. Everything is basic. We were ripped off by asking local shopkeepers to hold our bags for us, and you will be swarmed. Swarmed by street vendors, and swarmed by children, and swarmed by camels, and parking lot goons, and children, and cheat cameramen, and stalker tourist guides, and camel children, and footwear thieves. So I just want you to know, mind your belongings. I guess it's just an old love story, but is it love or hate? Can you believe I was told to get out with my selfie stick? Don't even think about seeing it under a full moon. And I want you to know, this tomb has no rides. One final one. And this is the first poem in my new manuscript, Oceanic, and this is called Invitation. Come in, the water is fine. You can't get lost here. Even if you want to hide behind a clutch of spiny oysters, I promise I will find you. If you ever leave me at night by boat, you will see the arrangement of red gold sun stars in a sea of milk. And though it's tempting to visit them, stay. I've been trained to gaze up all my life, no matter the rumble on earth, but I learned it's okay to glance down into the sea. So many lessons bubble up if you know where to look. Clouds of plankton churning in open whale mouths might send you east, and chewy urchins might send you west. Squid know how to be rich when you have 10 empty arms. And can you believe there are humans who don't value the feel of a good bite and embrace at least once a day? Underneath you, narwhals spin upside down while their singular tooth needles you like a compass pointed towards home. If you dive deep enough where imperial volutes and hatchetfish swim, you will find all the colors humans have not yet named, and wide caves of black coral and clamshell. A giant squid finally let itself be captured in a photograph, and the paper nautilus ripple flashes scarlet and 2 kinds of violet when it silvers you near. Who knows what will happen next? And if you want to look up, I hope you see the dark sky as oceanic, boundless, limitless, like all the shades of blue in a glacier. Listen how this planet spins with so much fin, wing, and fur. Thank you.
Where do you want to sit? I feel like we did musical chairs.
I know.
Thank you for the beautiful reading, Janine and Amy. I have some questions for you. And I wrote them out too. Have some water, please. I wrote them out because I can't do anything ad lib.
Okay, great.
Okay. So I was trying to figure out how you guys met each other, and you had no answer. But one of the recurring possibilities was that you'd met at Kundiman at the retreat at a workshop, and then Janine pointed out that it never worked out. You never made it to the classroom. So I was thinking about teaching and pedagogy, and since you're both writers who write, writers who teach creative writing, I was very curious about how you teach, how your experience in workshops have shaped you as a writer, how your writing informs your workshop. And I'm asking this partly from a Kundiman perspective and thinking about those Judo Diaz blog posts in the New Yorker a few years ago, where he basically made plain to everyone what writers of color have always known, that the creative writing workshop has been very exclusionary to discourses of race and identity and other kind of normative otherness, things like that, non-normative othernesses. So my question, sorry to be so long-winded, is about identity and craft, and whether identity can be integral to craft, and how your experiences in workshop have helped you figure these things out as writers, but also as teachers of creative writing.
I'll start. It's a fantastic question. And there's lots there to unpack, so I'll just tackle it maybe as, there's plenty. I'm gonna just unpack just a little bit of it. I will tell you, so I went to Ohio State for my grad program, and it was a pretty lonesome time in the classroom. It was not lonesome outside of the classroom. Go Bucks. But sorry, it's so obnoxious. We're number 2 in the country in college football, and I have to always drop that every time. But I will say there was a poem. I remember it was very kind of formative. I've never forgotten it. I was writing about a visit to my grandmother in South India, and it's this beautiful place in Kerala. I don't know if anybody's been there. It's so gorgeous. They call it the Emerald Coast. one person in my workshop was like, I don't buy this as India. I mean, where's the poor people? Where's the pollution? And, that kind of thing. And I was just, you have to be poker faced when people are talking about your poems, but it just kind of broke my heart in many different ways that I had to kind of, if they said, oh, your line break is wrong, I could take that, but if it was just because of the kind of insularity of not being able to imagine that a country could be beautiful, that kind of thing. So that was, and nobody had really kind of jumped in. Once that person started, then the whole thing was like, yeah, more pollution, add some noise, to the point where, like, heaven forbid, I write about beauty in a place. And there's definitely, like, scary, sketchy places in DC, but there's also beautiful places in DC as well. So I don't know if that necessarily answers your question, but I know that I was thinking back then, if I ever get to a situation where I'm leading a workshop, none of that is going to be tolerated in my workshops, and it never has been. And more than that, I just, I think we were always kind of trained, write what you know. So if people in the workshop are only writing what they know, it is hard to kind of make commentary on things that they don't know, that kind of thing. And Lucille Clifton has this great quote. She says, I don't write out of what I know, I write out of what I wonder. So I like that as almost a teaching mantra too, like, what else, or what are the possibilities, rather than what is this poem trying to be through my limitations, that kind of thing. So it's kind of a big answer, but I don't know if you want to tackle?
Sure. I feel like I had an answer that I was thinking of, and then I got so carried away with your story, and then I was trying to think if the poem that you were talking about was rap.
Actually, it was. That's amazing. That was from my very, very first book, which was my thesis, actually.
Yeah, so that's a poem that I teach to my students all the time. It's actually a poem that I've used for job talk. So thanks for getting me a job.
I'll accept that. Cash credit card money.
But I really hear you with this. With this experience of just, feeling kind of lonely. For me, my workshop experience, I think, was just incredibly different, because when I was doing my undergraduate studies and when I was doing my MFA, I was still dealing, at least partway through my MFA, with the fact that I was undocumented and I had not come out, and it was something that I was not able to articulate in the space of the workshop. And so every poem that I brought in, people would just kind of try to guess as to what was going on in the poem, and usually that would mean that I would have to speak to my professors during their office hours and kind of explain to them in confidence what it was that I was trying to do, because I knew that whatever was going to happen in the workshop, they can guide me in terms of line breaks, they can say this image is not working, but I also still had feedback that was like, where are the cacti? Where's the border wall? And I'd come from the Philippines. I flew right into LAX. So my experience was not the experience of undocumented immigrants that people had imagined in the workshop. And so for me, the workshop was incredibly difficult. But I learned line breaks, and I learned how to craft image and metaphor. And I would say that maybe as a teacher, I try to be really aware of the world that is living outside of the poem. Because for me too, because the workshop was a lonely place, I found that some of the joy that I was able to bring into my life when I was an undergraduate and when I was working on my MFA, and probably even through the PhD, was through a number of community organizations. So, for example, when I was in Houston working on my PhD, I was working with writers in the schools, and I got to work with like second and third graders. And for them, rainbows popping out of their hearts was the most brilliant thing in the world. And I actually even bring in those poems written by my second and third graders into the graduate level workshop as a way of reminding, I think, my students of the joy that is existing outside the workshop, and just to kind of keep pushing them to draw from the world that is around them, so that we just don't get stuck in the workshop and the workshop mode and the thinking that goes on in the workshop, which also includes, making sure that I actively am teaching a lot of contemporary work too, to give them the sense that poetry is very much alive. Because, when I was reading some really, really, canonical works in my workshops, sometimes that was helpful, but then, there was no experience that I felt could in any way guided me and in how I wanted to live my life, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's really remarkable that one of the poems that helped you through the experience of lonely workshops was Amy's poem.
We did not plan this.
But also it speaks to what you were both doing, was just looking for other curriculums, looking for other spaces, and is there something you would say about identity as a kind of element of craft? I mean, how do you respond to students? Do you think workshops are changing now, which is what I'm saying, especially since you're in a teaching position?
Sure. I think just one tangible way it's changing is that the insistence of italics of foreign words is not it's not a mandate anymore. Before, if I used a word like it's not even bangos, which is a specific type of Filipino fish, people would be like, I don't know what that is because I've never heard of this. You must italicize it. So it would be like, so on a craft level, it seemed the wrong move to me because I don't say, hey, Dustin, would you like a dinner of bangos? You know what I mean? But I felt like it was like just putting this spotlight on something, whereas I think now more and more I'm so pleased when I see just this vibrancy and this of language in there. So it's not, so I'm not even aware of so this is a small little detail on craft, but I'm not nearly as kind of nervous as I was about throwing in foreign words in there as well, because that's the world.
Yeah.
There's, we delve into Spanish and French just without even knowing it.
Multilingual.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say the internet has really helped.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if I think about my experience, especially as an undergraduate, because I would have those workshop moments too where someone would say, can you change this English word to something in Tagalog, right? And then so in a revised version, I would just add in, right, like a word in Tagalog, and I would think, I don't even talk this way with my family. And also, I was, there were words that were reserved for the family. And there were words that I didn't feel like putting into my poems because for me that workshop space was not necessarily a familial space. But then, so, as people are kind of throwing out these words or throwing out these ideas, put more desert in there. If your speaker is undocumented, again, put the cactus, put all of these other things in there. Now that's an opportunity in the classroom to say let's do some research. Let's pull up Wikipedia. Let's do an image search. Let's as a way of just expanding the vocabulary of all of the students in the room. I mean, not necessarily say that what we would pull up on Wikipedia would in any way help, the poem, but again, just as a kind of reminder that the world is so much larger than what we understand even, sitting in our desks.
Well, you bring up rec, which I didn't expect you to, because I was thinking about recs, especially Janine. I don't know the poem by Amy, or I don't remember it, but the word rec comes up a lot in your book, and you have a poem called Rec. And it struck me as very descriptive of the consciousness of your speakers, but also of the kind of provisional American identity. And so maybe there's a way to think about rec as a poetics. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about why this word is so important to you. Maybe it has to do with Amy. Or maybe there is a kind of poetic element to thinking about recs. Everything's kind of a rec. You're a rec. The poem's a rec. America's a rec.
Well, I can talk a lot about rec, but I think
You guys can both talk
rap.
about recs.
Yours is
apparently.
rap.
Yeah.
Rap. Okay.
Which is
Yeah.
very close to rec.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're the rec and you're the rap. But why rec?
So in 2008, my father and I were involved in a car accident. We were hit from behind by a driver who the police had estimated was going anywhere between 50 to 70 miles an hour on a semi-residential road, just based on the damage alone. So small PSA, don't text and drive. So in that car, I mean, we survived, both of us survived. We were in a Subaru, so there's my commercial. Yes. So we both had like bruising. My dad had a hairline fracture in his collarbone, but I had suffered a pretty severe concussion and was pretty much on a loop, about a 20-second loop for days on end. And so that poem, the poem Wreck that's in my book, rises out of that particular experience, but I would say that it actually did something in terms of my poetics in a way. I mean, I hadn't been thinking about Wreck before that, but I was in the middle, or maybe about 3/4 of the way through this manuscript when I had the concussion, and my memory just was gone. I had no idea what I was writing. I didn't know who I was. I started confusing myself with the speaker, that though she's very much based from my life, she's not me. So I spent, quite some time trying to figure out who I was, who she was, and my various identities. And that changed very much like my poetics, because I relied so much on my memory, and I relied so much on being able to craft a narrative, right? So take all these different experiences that I'd had as a way of like linking them together to say something much larger about the family, about immigration, and suddenly those memories were all gone and all those ties were completely severed. But here's the thing. One of the very first things that came to me after that accident was, you are a poet. And I had no idea what that meant. I had no idea what to do with that word or this identity. But I remember lying down in bed, and it was just there, and I was like, ooh, interesting, right? So it came to me, nothing else came to me, only that. I couldn't even remember why I had like a neck brace on, but this identity came back to me, and in that way, I don't know, it kind of taught me to trust that the words would always come back, which maybe it's not something that I would say if suddenly I was like hit with dementia, right? Or like something else. I know that very much I'm saying that in a space of like some kind of privilege and some kind of able-bodiedness, but that came back, the words started coming back, and it just kind of reshaped how I thought how a poem could be made.
So I have to ask, there's a poem, you write it actually, I think it's Landscape of the American Dream, and there's that moment where the speaker speaks about her and her brothers. We are all wrecks.
What wrecks we were.
What wrecks we were.
What wrecks we
What
were.
wrecks we were. What expert wrecks burning down those sun-spun streets. So was that before or after?
That was before.
Oh my God.
That was before. All those poems about driving without a license and driving cars, all before the wreck, yeah. But I don't know, what wrecks we were sounded better than like, what hot messes we were.
This next question is for Amy. Amy, I've always admired your work for its almost scientific engagement with nature. And as I was reading the books again for this conversation, I was also realizing there's also a lot of history in the books. And there's kind of like a entanglement between history and nature. I'm thinking about poems like Birth Geographic, A Natural History, The Color Red. You reference folklore, Old Wives' Tales, Ancient Rome. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that relationship between history and the environment, maybe perhaps how it figures in your new works. I think that you're writing more about history now, too.
Oh my goodness, these are all such brilliant questions. So trying to figure out nature and history and the whole swirl of things, mythology and folklore. These are things that I've been. I feel so cheesy saying it. I am such a complete nerd, and I'm
I knew that.
aware of this. I know, and she still loves me. But so I don't remember a time when my parents were taking me to the library. I didn't know. novels. I didn't know stories. What I would do, my idea still of a good time is, and I hesitant to even say this out loud, but is to read a book about shells, like, or the giant squid, or to curl up by a fireplace and read about minerals and gems. Like, I'm still that same.
And the history is
little
also
girl.
kind of, it's
Yeah.
tangentially approached, so
It is, it
your
is.
Yelp reviews of,
Yeah.
you're writing about
Sure.
history kind of transformed into a contemporary era, and how we
Yeah.
deal with the past, which is like, we don't deal with the past.
That's true, and I think for a lot of it is, as that little girl reading these books on science and, biographies, so I did like biographies, that to me, like, Harriet Tubman, Anne Boleyn, these are all like women I just were so fascinated by as a little girl, and I'm still fascinated by now. With the rare exception, Harriet Tubman was a very, very rare exception. I never saw any brown girls in any of these books about nature, history. I mean, it was very much kind of a footnote, that kind of thing. And so I don't think I ever sit at my desk to say, I will now insert a brown girl now in history. But it's a way for me to kind of find my place in this whole, thing called history, but also to see my relation to science, my relation to the outdoors. Why do we not see any brown girls outside in nature writing as often, still, and it's 2016. So do brown girls not like the outdoors? I know that's not true, but why are they not writing about it, or why are they not being published in places like Outside Magazine or things like that? So it's all very complicated, but I think it's born from a place of not seeing anybody who looks like myself. And when I say brown girl, I would have been happy with a Latina, I would have been happy by a half, in anything, but it was all from this kind of Caucasian male point of view, which was great, and I was still entranced and enchanted, but I think now especially there's a lot of girls coming up when I visit elementary schools and high schools that are so excited about science, so excited about nature, and they want to see themselves in books as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's really kind of just a refiguring of what is my place. So much of my first kind of early workings were, coming of age narratives of my own life. Now I'm just wanting to look outward.
Yeah, it seems like you're trying to find a way to write
Yeah.
other histories that don't exist. So
Yeah.
maybe the question I might ask you guys is, what are you trying to write that you find is missing?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, for me, of course, it was just writing through my undocumented experience, especially being someone who's coming from the Philippines. Now the new work is exploring both the car accident, the memory loss, the concussion, all of that good stuff, because that was also happening at the same exact time that I was applying to become a naturalized citizen. So my memory was wiped out at the same exact time that I was becoming an American. Which again, right, like is part of me writing myself into. I know. But so much of that is me writing myself into this narrative that is so far being controlled. I mean, and I think just my experience in the workshop with people saying like, put in a cactus, like put in la migra, right? Like, and me putting it in there and then having to go research a little bit and then saying, wait, what is happening here? And I remember a workshop that I was in, or I was sitting in office hours with the poet Eamon Grennan, and he was trying to understand what it was that I was doing. And I finally said, I'm trying to write the girl out of the desert. And he was like, all right, that's a starting point. And so I just started removing all of the desert landscape that I had not personally experienced, right? Like that was not my experience. I was writing what they knew.
That's so interesting about writing the desert, like taking the desert away from the narrative, right? It makes, it makes no sense that anybody who knows you knows that the desert is not a part of your life. Right now I'm working on essays, actually, so not poems, although poems are always kind of popping up here and there. Right now, I think Jennifer mentioned earlier, I'm about 50% done with a collection of lyric nature essays, and they're also being illustrated. So that's been an interesting process. It's the book, basically, that I wish, again, that I was reading in high school or something. And it's about kind of the wonders that kind of don't get, the wonders of the animal and plant world that don't get talked about. The nuggets of it came from, there was a poem I was researching in Lucky Fish, where I was reading about pygmy rabbits. And as I was composing the poem, just as I do on a normal day, just reading pygmy rabbits, and before I could finish drafting the poem, the last pygmy rabbit on Earth died. On Earth died. So that was the first time. It was so stunning. I kept saying, wait a minute, not the last one. That was not the last one. It was the last one on Earth. So that to me kind of shook up my whole, I think you mentioned the internet before, and I love poring over. I go to, aquariums and research facilities all over the country and talk with botanists and things, but it is very easy to just be able to click and see. There's now, webcams. You can check on, sea lions in Monterey or whatever, that kind of thing. But yeah, the last pygmy rabbit was gone, so there became an immediacy for me about all the kind of the plants and animals that I loved as a little girl, and encountered basically throughout my readings, to the present day, doing small little snippets. So nothing's over 5 pages, but it's a small kind of lyric meditation with about maybe 10%, memoir kind of thrown in. But it's really, the focus is on these strange and beautiful animals and plants that are maybe not really thought of as beautiful and strange by people. So the comb jelly, the narwhal is one of my favorites, and people, if you guys know a narwhal, the skin is mottled, so it comes from the Norse word for corpse, basically. So it's not really, you don't really see any stuff. Maybe now you see starved narwhals, but not very much. It looked like floating corpses, a whole pod of them. But they have a tooth that sticks, it's puncturing through its skin. So it's not really a huggable, nobody really says like, oh, you my little narwhal, nothing like that. But I love this kind of thing, so. That's what I'm doing. I know, I told you I'm such a dork, I'm such a nerd.
Well, maybe it's a good time to ask the audience if you have any questions.
And if you don't mind, I'll walk the mic over to you so we can make sure to capture the question on video. So yeah, please raise your hand. I'll bring the mic.
No pressure. Great.
Hello. Why is there so much anger and fear regarding the undocumented in this country?
Turn on the
No,
news. Well, so do you mean regarding the undocumented or being someone who is undocumented? Because I think so much of that overlaps, right? I'm trying to think of a way to answer that question without generalizing the experiences of immigrants, particularly undocumented immigrants, because undocumented immigration and immigration in general is just not created equally. When people say that the system is broken, here's one example. I immigrated, as I mentioned, when I was 8 years old. It was 1991. And when I found out that I was undocumented, it was during my senior year of high school when I actually got back my the report after filling out my FAFSA, where it said that you were not a citizen, you can't get any funds for college. I was graduating as a valedictorian. But when I went to see a nonprofit immigration lawyer, he had pretty much spelled out that the paperwork for people coming from the Philippines was so far behind that in 2001 they were still working on applications from 1990. So when people, right, so there, right, like there is that anger, there's that pain, there's that sadness. And he pretty much just told me that what I needed to do was get pregnant, which I didn't do. Right? So, I feel like maybe just offering that little kind of specific tidbit might help inform like why this is such a frustrating experience. And I think, if you were someone from the outside looking in, it can be really frustrating if you don't understand how the immigration system works, right? Like when people say like go to the back of the line, like it probably doesn't exist, and if it does, it exists. There are so many lines, so many lines. I mean, that's just specifically the Philippines. You know, it may someone coming from Europe might have an entirely different experience.
Just as a follow-up, I wonder if you might be able to talk about how poems as a form allowed you or helped you address that sort of sense of identity and shift and you know.
So I actually had first started out writing a novel. So after I found out that I was undocumented and had filled out the paperwork to go to community college, I decided then that I was going to write a novel, right? Because I thought I have a story to tell, and for some reason at that time, you know, when I was just barely graduating high school, I thought the only way to tell stories was through writing a novel. And I got maybe about 70 pages into that and realized that I couldn't tell that story, right? Because I had no way of being able to tell a straightforward narrative. And so pretty much I deleted that. No, I didn't really delete that. It exists. No one will ever see it. I think it's on a floppy disk. But, you know, writing through poetry allowed me to break up that kind of straightforward narrative, the way that maybe most people understand immigration, right? Which is that a family comes from another country, they have this American dream, they apply for paperwork, and then they become Americans, right? And that's the end of the story, right? It has this nice, clear arc. And my arc certainly was not that way, and my family was a mixed status family, right? So even within my family, we all had very, very different experiences with immigration. And being able to write about that through poetry, right, where there was this central idea, central theme, central experience that I can approach through multiple angles. Like for me, poetry was the way to do it. I mean, maybe if I'd taken and, you know, gone to graduate school first and figured out how to write a more complicated novel as opposed to chapter one, I just noticed my chapters were getting smaller and smaller, and I was becoming more and more secretive.
I'm wondering too, I'm just still raising my hand. Since this is a Kundiman feature event, I wonder if the three of you could actually talk about the importance of Kundiman to you, both in terms of your writing and in terms of your sense of community.
Sure. Kundiman for me has been, and I've served in its capacity as a faculty member and I think a staff member this most recent summer. And it's the kind of community and group that I wish was in existence when I was an undergrad, when I was a grad student. It is a place where I think, and I don't know how else to describe it without sounding cheesy, so I'm just going to say it, but it is like instant family when you walk into a room. Like that's absolutely not scripted that Janine and I can't remember where we met, because I feel like it's been, you know, well over a decade. And I know that's not true, but I don't remember. Like it's suddenly with the internet, I was lucky. I consider myself lucky in some ways that there was no social media when I was in grad school. There was a small bit of sadness though in knowing that I think if there was social media, I think I would have been able to connect with poets from around the country, and not just, you know, Asian American poets, but just poets in general around the country. But I think what sets Kundiman apart is that there's an absolute freedom to risk on the page as well as risk off the page, in terms of just being able to say like, hey, you know, I'm undocumented, and that's not the main thing that the person sees about you. Or being Filipino, half Filipino, half Indian is not the first thing that people see. It's definitely a part of me, but it's not the main kind of thing of me. And it's a lot of freedom from explaining. It's a lot of freedom to just kind of get busy on the page and to have that immediate kind of support in that capacity. And this is my 15th year of teaching. I tallied this up not too long ago and I was stunned. So 15 years of teaching at the college level, and I want to say I had 7 writers of color in my classes total. And I live in a rural kind of place, but it makes me so sad, you know, that kind of thing. So when I teach at Kundiman, it's amazing to see a room full of people who look like me. You know, frankly, I mean, it's amazing. When I have never had that before ever. Yeah.
So I'm a Kundiman Fellow. I graduated in 2014, and I feel like I have a number of stories where I have this moment where I realize this is why Kundiman exists. But I'll share one with you, and it was from my first retreat, actually. Another fellow had encouraged me to apply, and I didn't really know what Kundiman was at the time. So this was in 2007. So Kundiman was, what, 3-4 years old at that time. And, you know, this fellow kept just telling me, you know, you have to apply. And I really didn't know what to do at Kundiman because at that time, again, right, like I didn't want anyone to know anything about me. And I didn't know what it would mean to be around other Asian Americans, especially because, like, you know, you sort of internalize the things that you see on the news about immigration, right? And so for me, undocumented immigration didn't even exist for Asian Americans, right? And so I go to this first retreat, and the sun had just set, and we were walking through, and this was still when it was at UVA. So we're walking through, it's getting dark, and there are all these fireflies around. And I don't know what prompted me, right? 'Cause again, I don't code switch all the time, but I just said, like, it's paputukan, which in Tagalog is like fireworks. And there were so many people who around me were just like, oh yeah. And like that for me is like this Kundiman experience, right? Like that Amy's talking about, where suddenly, right, you're not needing to explain anything. I mean, one, for me to even just say that word suggests already, right, like that already tells me that I felt like I was home, and I felt like I was with family. And just the fact that people knew what I was talking about, and I didn't even have to translate, and that was it. Oh. Oh, you have to turn it on. I keep turning it off.
My experience with Kundiman is a little different because I have always been a staff member, and so I didn't get you know, the benefits of being a fellow or being a faculty member. But in 2003, I had just moved back to New York after living in San Francisco for a couple of years, and I went to one of those stuffy, uptight poetry parties where everyone ignored me. And there, I met Joseph Legaspi and Sarah Gambito, who are the founders of Kundiman, and you know, they were so outgoing and friendly, and they started telling me about this passion project. They wanted to get a bunch of Asian American writers together, to poets, and help each other and form a community and have workshops and connect across generations. And I just thought, you're crazy. It's not going to work. People don't like each other. Poetry is for kids. And I thought that the loneliness that Amy and Janine were talking about in terms of workshop was inherent to being a writer. And what I discovered when we started working together and doing these retreats and organizing these readings was that the loneliness is not inherent to being a writer, but the loneliness I was feeling was really distinct to my background, and always feeling like I don't fit in. I don't know that I fit into Kundiman, but I feel like I have people who have taught me about the possibilities of community and how you can be a writer through generous practice, through exchange, that it is a social engagement and an ethical engagement. It doesn't compromise your writing, it doesn't compromise your aesthetics or your desire for solitude. Because I think we're all rather solitary, each of us, because we want to be, but we always have this sort of connection that brings, I mean, I have such wonderful memories of each of you at retreats and outside of retreats. Like I knew Janine was amazing when she came to the retreat, and they were doing some kind of poetry contest. They were creating a poetic forms, and I never participate because I'm not a joiner. And Janine did an interpretation of a poetic form that was invented in the moment, and it was a dance. And she wiggled her hips in form and meter, and I just thought, this woman is so brave and hilarious. And I did something, and that was your first retreat. That was about 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So, and look, this is like history in action.
No, like 9 years ago.
Kunimon's about 10 plus years old now, right? Cave Canem is 20 plus years old, and you'll have now people coming to these organizations had the opportunity of having Kunimon and Cave Canem and these organizations around for all of their high school experience, all their college years, right? And they're arriving at these organizations with a literary world that is so different than what it was, or what was even possible, considered possible for them 10, 20 years ago. So I'm curious, and this is a conversation we're having within Cave Canem, how are you handling the intergenerational dialogue, within the organization? Because you have some people who are arriving now and, rightfully taking advantage of the space that these organizations have created, but, maybe they're not as aware or not as familiar with, the writers and the work that was put in to get to this point.
I mean, I think one way to take a look at that, and that's really perceptive. Those of you who don't know in the audience, Cave Canem, and Kyle, feel free to jump in, is an organization to promote African American poets. And Kundimon was very much based and modeled after it, actually. But one thing, going back to your question, that I would say is, I think people are actively or subliminally, I hope it's actively promoting and trying to teach generosity and openness, and which is not, as you know, probably very easy to teach. But in terms of like what you were saying, there's some, I think, and it's a very exciting time to be a poet in America, I think, right now. Hands down, the most exciting time to be a poet. But I think sometimes there might be, entitlement is not the wrong word, but I think maybe people not understanding, there was a time when you could open up a book and not see any writers of color and nobody would say a thing. Now you get 10 articles about why this was a bad thing, that kind of, and then when I don't personally sit and think that it's my duty to, chastise other people at all, but I think when people get a seat at the table, it's absolutely, absolutely crucial for them to scooch over to the side and pull up another seat for somebody else. And when I see that not happening, I don't actively come around because I don't have the time nor the patience to say, hey, you need to do this. But I think by modeling generosity and modeling being a mentor, the kind of mentor you wish that you had that I had when I was really, really hungry for one and looking for one, I think is the best way. And I see, this is I'm trying to keep it cool here, but this is mind-blowing to me that Janine ever looked to my poems as a model for anything, or that is using it for job talks, that kind of thing. I had little to no Asian American models when I was growing up, so for example. So I just hope that I'm not perfect in any way, shape, or means, but I think hopefully one thing that I try to model is being generous to everybody, not just Asian American writers, but to writers coming up fresh out of high school, or to the hapless student who's saying, hey, I want to be a poet, I don't know what to read, can you share some stuff with me?
I think that's the right answer. I also think that what you're talking about, Kyle, is something that I worry about, I grapple with. And part of it, I think this happened with Cave Canem, is that it started out as a grassroots organization where everyone pulled their sleeves up and started working, and it's become an institution where to get into Kunimon is a CV line. And I meet very talented Asian American writers all the time who apply time and again and they don't get in. And it's hard to say, we are inclusive when it's, by the nature of its success, it has to be small, it has to be, an intimate experience. I think this is partly too because the world of writers has changed. I think Amy's right, it's a wonderful time to be a poet, but I also think that people are more professionalized. And I don't know how to answer that. I'll admit I haven't been back to retreat in a few years now because my life's gotten so complicated. But I think doing what Amy advocates for, which is that everyone is someone who needs a connection, a mentor, an interlocutor in a conversation of poetry.
I feel like you both have answered that question really well. I mean, I would say maybe like if I were going to add anything, it would be just from my experience being one of the lone fellows who did not return in a timely manner. So I became a fellow in 2007, and then I didn't come back for my second retreat until 2014. And I'm pretty sure we're supposed to graduate within 5 years. And I graduated in 2015, right? So
She was delinquent.
yeah, it's like I kept changing my majors or something. And so, you know, I went to the retreat at UVA, I went to the retreat in Fordham, and then I was at the retreat when it opened itself up to fiction writers, right? So I've been through some pretty big changes with Kundiman, and when I came back in 2014, I was already an assistant professor. And suddenly I was in these workshops with, you know, I'm gonna say young writers, but I don't mean that to be, right, like, I mean, like some of them I think we maybe even had a fellow who's still working on their undergraduate degree. There were students who were working in their MFAs, but I was in these generative workshops where I was producing, you know, stuff that I just written hours before the workshop. And so this kind of like generosity, right, like it wasn't even this issue of like a generational thing. It was just like, no, we are all starting from scratch here all together. And I'm asking for feedback from someone who is still pursuing their college degree. And I am so open and willing to listen to what they have to teach me because I am just so like raw on this page. I don't know if that like answers anything, but I guess I could maybe just like add that. And I think that speaks to how the workshops happen in Kundiman because it's like an entirely generative experience, and so no one comes with, you know, their like the manuscript that they've already been sending out to places, and they're bringing in polish work as a way of like patting themselves on the back, right? Like it's just like you show up there, you get this prompt, and you figure it out while everybody else is figuring it out.
I think that kind of model has really encouraged rawness,
Mhm.
and that the art is primary at the retreats. But you know, the professionalization I think is something that you're opening ourselves to.
Yeah.
And yet it's also it changes things a little bit.
Mhm.
And it just changes things a little bit. I think that might just be inevitable. It's Rita's problem.
Well, on that note, I want to thank our readers, Janine Joseph, Amy Nizuka-Matado, and our moderator, Jen Chang, for a terrific evening. Thanks to all of you for coming out. A couple of things. First of all, there are 2 books for sale in the back. I'm sorry to say there's a wonderful little J sculpture with cards that you can pick up that give Janine Joseph's email, website. You should go check out her website, and if you want to get a book of hers there, please do. I'm sorry we don't have them here. You should go do that as soon as you get home. But you can get books by Amy and Jen and get them signed. Also, you all have surveys on your seat or next to you. Please fill them out. We use these surveys to determine what kind of programs we should be doing. They're very helpful to us. So you can give them to me. You can put them on the table. Finally, speaking of events, we have a great event coming up next Tuesday at 4 o'clock, Poetry, Publishing, and Race with Kathy Park Hong, Evie Shockley, Carmen Jimenez-Smith, and the editor of Poetry Magazine, Don Scher. So I hope you come. You can check it out on our website. You can see all the events that we have going on. Thanks so much for coming out. Have a good night.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.